Hey there troops, it's me, the Tactical Brit. And something a lot of people have been talking about recently is the content that's in Battlefield 5 and whether or not it's enough. Now, we've recently had some blog posts coming out from EA and DICE, which is a really nice change of pace considering almost everything up until now hasn't really had any direction. The conversations have been very sporadic, and it almost feels as though there hasn't been a clear line of information as to what is actually going to be in the game. It's almost been left to people like Flakfire Gaming to pick apart trailers piece by piece to figure out what it is exactly that we're going to have at launch and what exactly will be in there in terms of content. And this is something that's of course really important. You know, you never really want to buy anything unless you know what's in it. You're not going to buy a box if you don't know the contents of it, so why would you buy the game if you don't know the contents of that either? And finally, it looks like we have some clarity on the matter, and the number of vehicles as well as weapons, sidearms and melee weapons has been confirmed today, and I want to run through all of that and talk about it. We also have a rough approximation on map numbers too, which is good, and I just want to talk about that today and whether or not Battlefield 5 has enough content, and that's what we're going to look at today. So Battlefield has confirmed that we have 30 primary weapons alongside 7 sidearms, 9 melee weapons, 16 gadgets, 7 different reinforcement call-ins and 24 vehicles. And I want to talk about each one of those one by one and talk about what they have to offer to the fray. Now, 30 primary weapons is an interesting one, and it's an interesting one because there are 6 per class plus a few others here and there, such as the self-loading rifles, and I think a lot of people are concerned about this number, but I'm not necessarily concerned myself. Now, there is a big missing one, and that is of course the M1 Grand, which doesn't appear to actually be in the primary weapon loadout so far, but I imagine that it's going to be added in Tides of War very quickly. But I've noticed that a lot of people are kind of disappointed or almost upset with what Battlefield 5 is offering here, but for me that's fine, honestly. Like, I always go over this argument, and I say it a lot because in Battlefield it makes a lot of sense. Less sometimes is more. And I think you can see this being evidently clear in Battlefield 4 and 3, where there were multiple weapons which we could arguably say were carbon copies of one another. They didn't really offer any different variations to one another, and they didn't offer anything special. Like an M416 in comparison to an AR-160, although the AR-160 was definitely much more operable at range, it definitely felt like you were firing the same gun. You could argue that the AK-5C especially was almost like firing nearly any assault rifle in the game, purely because they just all handled very similarly. And I'm totally okay with there only being 30 primary weapons, provided all of them handle in their own individual ways and actually offer you different playstyles. I think one of the reasons people appreciated BF3 and 4 so much was not that the weapons necessarily handled different to one another, but because there was so many of them that mastery felt interesting. And we can flip that over quite easily so that there aren't many weapons, but mastering them is equally as challenging and equally as satisfying. And I think that's just the general goal of what's being had here. And I think from the guns we've used in the beta, it's evidently clear that a lot of them will handle vastly different from one another. Now, one thing I am a little bit disappointed in is that some of the weapons do appear to have been taken over from Battlefield 1. Now, although this is a bit disappointing because, you know, I don't really want to see a Lewis gun again, and I don't really want to see things like the P08 pistol again, they're going to handle very differently, and in that sense, although they are copies of the game previously, they will be very different weapons. The Lewis gun handling in Battlefield 1 will be nothing like the Lewis gun handling in Battlefield 5. And that's understandable, that's acceptable, and I'm totally cool with that. I just feel as though it slightly would have been better, just slightly would have been better to have something new. I know it's a bit of a ball ache, and I know, you know, we can talk about the fact that these guns will handle differently, but I just think a new gun that looks different and does different things is better than something we've seen before. So I think I'm a little bit disappointed in that sense. One thing I think is worth bearing in mind is that Battlefield 5 does not feature a variant system, which means that you're not going to have the same guns that have been carbon copied and pasted with different variations, because that somewhat inflated the gun count that Battlefield 1 actually have, because in actuality it had much less, it was just there was lots of different variants of them. Now, I think I'm really intrigued with some of the stuff that we've seen so far. I think the sidearms are looking very interesting. They handle very differently based on what we've seen in the beta, and there's 7 of those at the moment, which is a reasonable number in my opinion. There's also lots of reinforcements. We have the V1, the JB2, the Strum Tiger, the Crocodile Tank, supply canisters. We also have a half-track as well as a pack wagon, which all look really cool. And in my opinion so far, this game almost feels like it's another Battlefield game. I know lots of people will say, yes, 3 and 4 had lots more content. I know some people will make comparisons to other games where perhaps had much more content in general in terms of vehicles and stuff like that, but I think 24 is a healthy number. I think 30 primary weapons is a healthy number. I think 16 gadgets is a healthy number as well. And I think what people need to bear in mind as well is that we've had lots of games before that have lots and lots and lots of things in them. A shit ton of vehicles and a crap ton of weapons. But not only does that make balancing more difficult, but it also does, of course, like I said earlier, reintroduce the case that lots of them will be the same and lots of them won't be very different. And I'd much rather a game that had a lot less content but did lots of variations of it, more than a game that had lots of content that was very similar to one another. And I think this is the general tone Battlefield should be taking for anything, really, in terms of maps, gameplay design. You know, sometimes in lots of scenarios, less is more, and that's what we've seen in games like Battlefield Bad Company 2, where they didn't necessarily have everything, but they had things that they did so differently that people really appreciated them, and people really appreciated mastering them. Now, if we were to go into other content, because I know people want to talk about that too, in terms of co-op and you know, Battle Royale and things like that, we've heard mixed messages about that at launch, and we're not entirely sure what the state and scenario is going to be. I think the delay definitely means we will see Battle Royale at launch, but I'm not too sure what we're going to see in terms of co-op. But in my opinion, for a game that's offering a fully fledged multiplayer with a reasonable amount of weapons that handle differently, alongside a co-op which will be coming at some degree within the game, a Battle Royale, and, you know, single player and multiplayer standard, it's all very good, it's very positive, and I'm honestly not concerned about the content of Battlefield 5 like lots of people have suggested. We even have things like reinforcements that nobody's thought about, like building entire new battery stations and, you know, towing cannons and things like that, that's going to diversify the game in ways we've never seen before. So, should you be concerned about Battlefield 5's content? Probably not, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, troops, it's been me, the Tactical Brit, and I'll see you again soon in the next video.